and welcome you into the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, the sports editor at Lootpress, joined as always by Rusty Udy, sports writer here at Lootpress. Rusty, how are you doing today?
Back in the hoodies, man. It's hoodie weather already, so must mean it's soccer sectional time, and sure enough, next week here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it was funny because I looked at the weather on I think Thursday evening because I was like, okay, how should I dress for Friday? And I saw, Friday morning we're going to be in the 30s. So I busted out the beanie, double layered the jacket, had the hand warmers just in case, the gloves, and it paid off. It was a good decision because it got chilly fast. We didn't even really get like a high 50s sort of week. We just went straight from maybe mid 60s to 40s.
Plumbing. Yeah. When, of course, I was on the hill down there at Linside, so during the interview with the coach, both the coaches, I was starting to get the shakes, from the cold. It just all of a sudden just dropped out of nowhere. So.
It gets really cold over there. I remember my first year covering a playoff game where they had Winfield down there. First week in November, it's like 32 degrees.
Yeah.
Man, it is freezing.
And it feels colder up there for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to go ahead and get into the show. Obviously, we've got a lot to break down from Week 7 and some state champions to talk about. We'll go ahead and hop into it. And I want to start with that game that you covered, James and Rowe and Greenbrier West. That was at James and Rowe. Really, the final score kind of wasn't indicative of how the game went. There was a chance that it could have been tied at halftime. Slobber knocker, kind of what you expect from these two teams. One's kind of injured, one's really injured and beat up, and one's kind of riding their momentum. For James and Rowe, another good defensive performance. This is now the 5th straight game where they've held an opponent under to 8 points or fewer. Held Greenbrier West to 6 points, won this game. And they've not given up double-digit points since Week 2 whenever they played Shady Spring. So really good for them. If you're Greenbrier West, you're really suffering from a brutal schedule at this point, and you got Petersburg up next. But just take us through what you saw Friday.
Well, it's a typical Greenbrier West James Monroe game. There were several times in the game. You're sitting down there on the sideline and you see the collision, and you kind of like, oh man. You could tell the pads were popping, and it was a hard hitting game. But it was a real interesting game. It seems like the times that Greenbrier West does lose to James Monroe, they kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. They had the very first drive. They really get no progress on the first drive. They shanked the punt. James Monroe gets the ball basically on about the 22-yard line of Greenbrier West. And of course, they go in and score. And then, Greenbrier West is kind of chasing from that point on. So, I guess the big play and the controversial play comes right before half. It's a 12-6 game. Dowdy goes back to pass, Leighton Dowdy for James Monroe. He's contacted by a couple defenders from Greenbrier West. Appears to be a clear fumble. Greenbrier West scoops it up. Looks like they're going to score on a scoop and score. Would have tied the game right before the half. As soon as the kid scoops it up, the whistle blows and the official blows it dead, says it's an incomplete pass. And of course, it just kind of, it wasn't anything, malicious or anything, but of course mayhem breaks out a little bit. Kelly Bond from Greenbrier West is visibly upset, and rightfully so, I think so. And so they wind up getting, I think there was a delayed game call on Greenbrier West. Basically, I don't know if they just didn't get the ball back to the official or what was going on there. Then there was an unsportsmanlike conduct call on one of the players. So, what appeared to might have been an even game, pushes the ball down inside, and then they score, and it's 18-6. So, but still, even at that, it's one of those things in sports where you're going to have stuff like that. And the Greenbrier West credit, they really bounced back well from it. They had a couple chances in the second half. It was 18-6. One of the chances was in the fourth quarter. Could have got the game to 18-12. They drive it inside the 10, but can't score. So you kind of have to credit the James Monroe defense, which they've kind of hung their hat on. And then it seemed like once that stop was made, then it's like the air went out of Greenbrier West a little bit, and then James Monroe was able to tack on a couple more and win the game. But it was basically a nip and tuck game, for the 4 quarters, at least 3.5. And so it could have gone either way. Greenbrier West is just so banged up right now. Of course, we've talked about Hazagagi getting hurt. the real good running back, and C.W. Sturgill went down. Is kind of the key to their defense. He goes down. Actually, I think it was on the play that they scored to go up 18-6 was the play he got hurt on, and had to be taken off on the cart. That really hurt the extent of that injury, but it was an ankle injury of some sort, and so that was kind of a deflator. And I think Kelly really explained it quite well. There's a difference in playing JV and varsity football, and you had a couple guys that had to go in and play, and it's just upper level, and you're playing James Monroe. If you're playing a lesser opponent, you might be able to get away with it. So, a tough game, a tough loss for Greenbrier West, a good win for James Monroe, because they kind of really needed that win too. And it's a little concern with Greenbrier West because I don't know if they can get in at 5-5 or 6-4. That's a possibility what they're looking at, down the stretch here, because they have not only have to go to Petersburg, but then they have Sherman after that. And as we've seen, Sherman appears to be a little bit of a sleeper and a pretty good football team, and then they end up with Trail. So it's going to be a tough 3-game stretch, especially as banged up as they are.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from this game is they're finding more ways to effectively use Leighton Dowdy. I kind of wrote about it this past weekend, but I think he only has 3 passing touchdowns on the year, 4 interceptions, but they've decided, hey, we're going to get him more involved as a runner. They were kind of going back and forth between quarterbacks at the beginning of the year, and this, in all likelihood, with 3 games left in their schedule, it's unlikely that Dowdy gets to the 10 touchdown mark, which he's been at. He's 27 2 years ago, the first team All-State quarterback, and almost 20 last year. And right now it's just 3. But credit to them for finding a way and him buying into it, because I think he's every bit of a 400-yard rusher at this point. So giving you the true dual threat and giving them a little bit more spark, just a little bit more edge to their offense.
It was interesting talking with Coach Mustaine too, because he basically. We knew they were young, but when you put it into numbers, sometimes you start to understand a little better. But like 33 of the 46 kids are 9th, 10th graders, so that takes time, to develop, as we've seen. And he said it was just really unfortunate that they had to start out with a Wheeling Central and a Shady Spring. That was a tough scheduling to start the season. But he kind of chuckled when he said it. He's like, people don't understand how hard it is to make a football schedule nowadays, and we do. We fully understand it, but. That's kind of what got them a little bit. And even the Shady game was a tight game. They were kind of in that game a little bit too. So, yeah, I mean, they really, defensively, they look really good. I mean, Caden Hines had a big pick at a key moment. He had a big pass he caught. I believe it was on a 4th down play too. So, they've got some guys that are really stepping up into this thing. And I'm pretty sure Caden, it's his first year playing football. So, he's kind of getting the groove a little bit. All the other guys are getting in the groove. And then the other guys are, the guys are veterans, are playing really well. So, James Monroe looks pretty tough right now.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the game that I covered, and that was Independence at Westside. We talked about it coming in. Matchup between 2 teams that are rated in the top 8. Home playoff games are on the line, and for Independence, they've been pretty dominant against AA competition. The 2 losses have come to AAA teams. For Westside, this is probably their most legit test of the season. I went through and I did the records of the previous teams that they played, and it had been 8-23 coming in. So this was probably Westside's big opportunity to make a statement, and it just didn't really unfold that way. Independence gets the ball first, goes right down the field. I think the first play from scrimmage is a 50-yard screen pass, and it just kind of takes a little bit of the air out. And offensively, Westside was just never able to get going, and a lot of it has to do with what Independence was able to do defensively. Landon Riddle had 3 sacks. They just did a lot. They were able to free him up, get him good rushing looks. And again, I wrote about it this weekend, but not Independence, but Westside found itself in a lot of 3rd and longs. I talked about it. They had 9 third down plays in the first half, and their average distance needed to gain to convert was 14.5 yards. So you're going out there facing 3rd and 14. It's just unsustainable. And they were able, defensively though, they were able to kind of put Independence, kind of keep them at bay. I talked about it with you before the show, but there were a couple interceptions that they had dropped. I'd say probably about 2 or 3, and then there was one called back in the second half on a roughing the passer call. But I thought they did well. You could reasonably have thought going into the halftime of that game, it's 14-0. There was Independence had a 3rd and 8 touchdown pass that was ruled that was ruled incompletion because the kid dropped it. Then the referees got together and they talked about it, and then they gave him the touchdown. So that pushes it to 21-0. And then, kind of the one that puzzled me a little bit was they got Independence to on third down. They stopped them probably with about 3 yards to go. And so instead of doing fourth down, there's a holding call, and they accept the holding penalty, and then just go ahead and they replay it down. And Silas Nelson has a 52-yard catch just on a little check down swing, and he breaks a tackle, and next thing you know, 50 yards later, he converted the first down, and they score a couple plays later. So it's just very difficult. You could look at it and be like, okay, we feel pretty good about that. And then Westside comes out of out of halftime, first drive, they go down, they score, they take almost 6 minutes off the clock. And again, if you look at it in one way, you could feel like, hey, we could have been down just 14-7 at that point and a whole lot of ball game to go. But for Independence, defensively, I thought it was an extremely strong effort. And if you're Westside, I think you have to find some other ways to win on early downs. We've talked about it a little bit, but the running game really hasn't featured anybody else outside of Caden Vance. In the first half of that game on Friday, only one other kid had a carry registered. And I understand that they're trying to find different kids, and the running back that they do rely on is a freshman. But whether it be running the ball or whether it be getting easier passes, it's just something they've got to do to get, because you can't play third and long every time, especially against a team like Independence that we feel is going to be one of those ones that's going to be making a bid for a semifinal or even a state championship berth.
Yeah, a couple things that, and you kind of hit on them. When you play a game like that against a team like Independence, the opportunities you get, you have to take full advantage of. And if you can make those turnovers, then that changes the game completely. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond as far as Westside goes from this, because, there is, when you look at the teams they play, there is a lot of question about that schedule. And in turn, there's a lot of question about, well, how good are they really? And so, there's going to be some doubters now, because of that. I think they legitimately can win their way out, the rest of the way. And if they can do that, then they've got another shot, and once it gets into the playoffs to make a little bit of noise. But you definitely, and I don't know, maybe it's just the fact you haven't been in a big game like that in a while, and with that much on the line that, maybe those opportunities, sometimes anxious, chances, go awry. And maybe that was what it was, and maybe they learned from that. That'll be seen, as we get into the playoffs. But they definitely don't want to, get sloppy now and trip up, in some games that they should win.
Yeah, and the rest, like I said, this is really, if this is going to happen to Westside, this is probably a good point for it to happen, because you still have 4 weeks. You have Shady and you have Tug on the schedule still, and those are teams that we in theory believe will probably test Westside just based on their results and how they played so far this year. So it's going to give the Renegades an opportunity to get some points and play in some really strong competitive games. Shady would probably be a playoff team in AA. I don't know if they'd be a home playoff team or an away playoff team, but they'd probably be a playoff team in AA. They've got a shot being a playoff team in AAA. Right. So they're gonna have chances to work on these different things. And like I said, 51-13 is a big margin. But when you really kind of look at it, hey, we make 2 tackles here, or just get a pass deflection or something here, that's a 14-7 game in the third quarter. So I think that there's reasonably, you don't kind of throw it all out or go automatic panic mode if you're Westside. I think that there's a lot of good to take away from it. You just got to just find ways to extend drives and just not get off the field so quickly. Because I think they turned it over on downs twice in the first quarter, and it was in their own territory. And they held Independence for the most part. Right. So it took Indy a while. And I was impressed with Independence's defense with Landon Riddle. He had 3 sacks. That's now, I believe, at least the 4th player that's had double-digit sacks for him. Conley's had 2 in a game. Blankenship's had 2 in a game. Greenway's had a couple in a game. And now Riddle. So they're a team that they show you a bunch of different things. They have a ton of different kids that can get after the quarterback. And I think this was improvement. Now, Vance is athletic. He doesn't have the same athletic profiles like a Dane Hatfield or Richardson, who are more freak athletes all around. But it showed to me progression for Independence to be able to get the quarterback down, to get to him, and when it's not just design run stuff, you're able to get them stopped.
I was really impressed with Riddle's kind of comments, about, how he was kind of running past Richardson. He was getting pressure, but he was running right by him, and he learned from that. And unfortunately, Caden kind of is the benefactor of, what he's learned. But Independence can really pressure you, and I think just it's another thing, like we've said with Independence and Bluefield both, that if we feel like they're probably going to get into playoffs. I'm not sure exactly where they're going to be, but whoever gets them is going to wish they hadn't.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think for both teams, there's still some good opportunity. Independence, obviously, schedule doesn't really lighten up for them.
Yep.
Just gets harder. I think they're on a bye this week, and then afterwards, big showdown
Probably a
with
good
Princeton.
time for a bye for them, really.
Yeah, I agree. But they did a bunch of different good things. One thing I thought probably aided their offensive line, they started rolling Brock Green out a little bit more, which I hadn't seen them doing. It was more standard drop back passing stuff.
Yeah.
Just the one thing I'd comment on him, and obviously freshman, but the West Side again did have some opportunities to generate some turnovers, and you're going to live and die with that. Freshman quarterback, he's going to go through his mistakes, he's going to learn, but
I think West Side is a lot better than the score.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, and it's just going to be a matter of how they can, bounce back. It's nothing to get knocked down. It's how you get back up. And like I say, I think they can win out. It's just they've got to play the way they can play.
Mm-hmm. We got two more games we're going to talk about as far as Week 7 goes. Liberty Shady, talked about it a little bit last week, but it was probably an elimination game for Liberty as far as the playoff goes. They're 2-5. They ended up losing this game. Shady just kind of did what they do well. They were able to distribute the ball around pretty evenly. Jalen Bailey had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, interception. Good athlete. Cal Colacerto had over 100 yards passing. Defensively, another Nathan Neasley interception. Just kind of checks all the boxes of what you expect to see from them this time of year. And for Liberty, it was a closer game. I believe it was actually 21-12 there in the third quarter, and then Shady finally started pulling away. We've talked about it. Liberty's going to have to learn from these experiences, and they're starting to open it up a little bit more. Chase Shea threw the ball again, so they're getting him good reps. But this is pretty much kind of what we expected.
Yeah, and the one thing that I've kind of been a characteristic of a Mark Workman team is like the record may say 2-5 or whatever, but they're going to come play every single week. So they're going to close out the season strong, and teams are going to have a hard time beating them because they just won't quit. But a win Shady needed. There's no doubt about that. And they have been very balanced, and that's a good characteristic to have. They're kind of in the need to win basically the rest of the way out to be in pretty good standing. But it's not a real surprise there.
Yeah, that when they play Westside later in the year, it's going to be a high leverage game. There's going to be a lot of stakes on that.
There's going to be a lot of stuff going on there. Yeah.
Last game of the week I want to talk about is Greenbrier Race Oak Hill. We thought this would be a really competitive game, and it was a game. Oak Hill just finds a way to survive these games. Close, they're probably like the most transitive property-proof team you can think of. Because we talked about, we didn't think Greenbrier East was a bad team. We thought they really compete with Oak Hill. It was just kind of the same as usual. Devin Richardson kind of breaks free, gets a couple of long runs. Really effective as a rusher at quarterback. James Green had a really nice game, 30 rushes, over 100 yards, and did his thing on the defensive side of the ball. I think he had 2 sacks and 4 tackles for a loss, and that's kind of what he's been the last couple of years. I think it was a Nicholas County game 2 years ago where he had 17 tackles and season opener. Again, it's just kind of what we expected for Greenbrier, so it's a really tough pill to swallow because it feels like in AAA that might be the door slamming in their face.
Right. It's just, each week I keep getting just amazed at the Oak Hill defense. We went into this season with, kind of a pretty good question mark on that defense, and they just keep performing every single week. And honestly, if you'd have told me they were going to hold Greenbrier East to 14 points, I'm not sure I would have went with that. Greenbrier East has a pretty lethal offense. The only kind of team that's made them look bad is Beckley, and that's just because they were so much bigger up front and really didn't have time to do anything. But credit to Oak Hill's defense. If they only have to score 21 points a game to win games, I like their chances a lot of weeks.
Yeah, it helps them all. And it's not like Greenbrier East is a team where you can just key on one player.
Yeah.
They have two good receivers, two good options in the passing game, a good quarterback that can deliver the ball to him, and they have a good running back too. So there's a lot of different players you have to defend and account for. It's not just one like most high school teams where they might have one or two dudes, and they have it. They have a lot of skilled players. So again, pretty impressive for Oak Hill to kind of hey, this is what we want to do, or this is who we want to take out of the game.
I think with Oak Hill, we're kind of at a point in the season though where the offense is a little bit of a concern. I mean, they're really not putting up. 21 points is solid, but I would have thought maybe against that Greenberry's defense, which has struggled at times, they would have scored more than 21 points. I mean, they're definitely lethal running the ball. There's no doubt about it, and then do a good job of controlling the clock a little bit. But they're just struggling in the pass game, and I'm just not sure. You got a game against University at the end of the season, which is going to be a big game, and they're a pretty solid team right now. I'm just not sure how that's going to work out. When you're going to have to be able to throw the football. I mean, you got Beckley on schedule. I just don't think you're going to be able to pound it on some of these teams. You're going to have to be able to connect through the air a little bit.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this too, and I was really curious because I think Moritz didn't have very many carries. And you look at Green, and this is by far probably a career high for him as far as carries, and on the season, I don't think he's had anything quite like this. I'm not even sure he's had 30 carries total in the season. So that was a little bit eye-raising for me, and I kind of wonder if they're trying to find the spark or something like that, or if Moritz is hurt or they have him on a pitch count, because we had talked about it. There were some thoughts that maybe he wouldn't even play football this year because it takes a bit of a pounding on him, but he's out there and he's not really getting the workload that you'd expect from a kid that big, especially like we talked about. Greenbrier is smaller. This felt like it was going to be a big spot for him to be able to kind of bowl over some kids, and they went with Green, so I think they're still trying to find something. And I would say by this point they probably are what they are, rely on the defense, and we have some dynamic kids on offense. Let's just see what happens when some of the plays break down. We hit a play here or there, and get out of there like that.
A lot of credit to Devon Marion and that coaching staff, just kind of figuring out each week a way to win, and that's the bottom line, there's no style points, no quality points, as far as, margin of victory, anything like that. It's just basically W's, and they're figuring out how to do it. So, that's the bottom line, as Stone Cold would say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to wrap up Week 7. I want to move on to Week 8 because we've got quite a schedule slate there. I want to start off with the game kind of mentioned last week. Beckley at Princeton. Princeton kids, Mark Hello and Brad Mosser did lose their appeals. So Princeton's basically going to be without 1,700 yards of offense and 25 touchdowns, which is a lot. I am really curious to see how this one unfolds. The cupboard's not bare for Princeton. They still have Barker. They still have a really good offensive line. They still have Daniel Jennings, Kalen Kaiser, guys that can play both sides of the ball. They have kids that they feel really good about. Beckley comes in, they're at that point where they've been the last couple of seasons where it's okay, you have one loss. What happens now? The last 2 years, it's kind of crumbled afterwards. You either backed your way into the playoffs or you missed the playoffs entirely, and obviously that's not going to happen this year, but this is the point of Beckley's schedule where it gets real. Even without those kids, Princeton's still a tough out. And then next week, I believe they have Spring Valley, and Cabell Midland's down this year, but this is the part of the schedule where every year we kind of look at now and see, all right, it's the easy part of the schedule is in the past.
And it's going to be at Princeton. That's a big thing. And I just think with Princeton, I know they've got capable athletes, but when you have a player like Mosser who can kill you, maybe you think he's going deep, he'll run the slant, and he'll turn a 5-yard catch into a touchdown or a 15, 20-yard gain. Lowe is a punishing back that just beats on you after a while. I think that's just going to hurt. Now, I don't know if we can, you want to turn around and say, oh, that's, throw the game out the window, because, they do have very capable athletes at Princeton, but it will hurt. There's no doubt about that. But, I mean, I think, just kind of running through the top of my head, I mean, this is clearly probably the best quarterback Beckley's faced. And, I think the difference with Barker is, he's a little smarter where he throws the ball and things like that. So, it's going to be a tall task for a Beckley defense that's played well this year, played real well. Has been some ball hawks back there in the secondary, so they'll get tested. They did a decent job against Dom last year. We'll see if they can, match that again this year and slow the running game down. But, man, I just really think this game's going to come down to the war in the trenches. Who can get the job done down there, who can move the other team a little bit. Because if Beckley can move Princeton a little bit and run the ball and control the clock, for a high-powered offense, that's the kryptonite. When they don't get as many opportunities and things like that. So, I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. But whoever wins the war in the trenches, I think is going to win this game, outside of crazy turnovers.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I think that's kind of flying under the radar, because we can put some tangibility behind the offensive stats, but Monster and Lowe are also the second and third leading tacklers on defense. Lowe's their best linebacker, which is really important when you talk about a Beckley offense that wants to run the ball a lot and use a bunch of misdirection to do it. Now you've got the linebackers that probably haven't played a ton back there, trying to get these keys and figure that out.
Especially the way Beckley runs different directions back there and stuff.
Exactly. You'll get tossed one way and then the fake reverse. So it is really interesting. I think that they are going to require a lot from Kaiser and Jennings up front. Maybe you get some different surfaces. Maybe you add some more bodies along that defensive line and try and stop the run. Maybe do 5-man fronts, or even try a 6-man front if you think you can do it, just to win and get some more guys looks. Daniel Jennings, you get Kaiser. If you can get Beckley into situations where you can rush the passer, you're going to feel good about having those two guys on the edge. They're two of the best defensive ends in the state, and I'd say probably the two best defensive ends in the area. So you want to free up those opportunities and those looks for them. The one thing I'd like to know is what they're going to do with Jennings on offense. The easy thing is to say, okay, we'll turn him into a halfback for 20, 25 carries a game. But Virginia Tech offered him as a tight end. So there's some capabilities there, and he's only caught 5 passes, but also you have a lot of mouths to feed on that offense, and I think he prefers to run the ball a little bit more. But there's a world where you could maybe, we can put him out here on Preston Clary on that side of the ball, or because if it's not Preston or AJ shading him, you might like your matchup anyway. But if it's not one of those two, I probably like my matchup even more, like Daniel Jennings going against those kids. And if you get that, then you put Klein and Mays in situations where they're not getting the coverage of the number one, so they're able to do and go about things as they normally do. There's just a lot. This is a really interesting chess match to me.
I think the one thing, as bad as the situation was for Princeton, getting to bye before that gives them time to do some different things, and probably going to show Beckley some things they've never seen before, which you would still expect that in a week game, but when you get 2 weeks to work on it, you're probably going to get some more surprises from them. So, it's going to be a slobber knocker, and honestly, it's going to be who can keep their head during this game.
Absolutely. This should be fun. And again, it has a ton of playoff implications for both teams, a lot of points. And if you want home field advantage, as they both do, you got to win this game.
Yeah, got to have it.
Absolutely. I want to move on to Greenbrier West at Petersburg. We talked about it a little bit, but West is just really in a tough spot injury-wise, and they're kind of hanging in there right now. I think they're at 4-3. If you drop to 4-4, we've talked about single A. We're not sure that's enough to get you in the playoffs. And obviously, West's schedule is different than most. They're going to get strength of schedule and bonus points from teams like James Monroe and Fort Fry, and even Pendleton County. But they're in a really tough spot.
Yeah, and physically they're just so beat up, and I just can't. I don't know this for a fact, but just watching Sturgill in that game, I can't imagine he'll play this week. That would be almost a miracle from the way it looked, because even though it didn't appear to be broke or anything like that, it did appear to be a pretty severe ankle injury, and trying to play 7 days later is going to be really almost impossible. So he's
already been hurt through a portion of the season.
Right. So I mean, they definitely have capable players. I mean, Brandon Pottiker's a very good player. Evan Vandal is a very good player, but you kind of wonder about Vandal a little bit, because he's really ran the ball a lot this year and has really taken a pounding. Just the two games that I've seen, the man game and the James Monroe game, he really took some licks, and it was a tough game against Fort Fry too. He got a little banged up in that game, so. Petersburg's in a little bit of a tough situation themselves. They kind of need the victory. They've got a big chance the next 2 weeks. They get Greenbrier West and James Monroe on their home turf. So, that's going to be kind of a desperation factor for them thrown in. I don't know the exact distance and mileage to Petersburg, but I know it's not down the road. It's a little ways to get up there. So that's a bus ride and things like that. And Greenbrier West was at James Monroe, which was another decent bus ride. So those things factor in, attrition wise and stuff like that. I was really impressed with Greenbrier West to be able to, kind of withstand, all the physical games they've been playing and keep grinding like they do, which you kind of expect from Greenbrier West kids. But it's a big one, it's a big one. They kind of need this win in a big way because, like we say, they still have a couple tough games on the schedule going out themselves.
Yeah, and they're not the only team that really kind of needs to win. If it's not as dire for our next matchup. Well, it's probably a little bit more dire for our next matchup, and that's James Monroe and Midland Trail. James Monroe, talked about, they're kind of sitting pretty. They're riding this win streak. They're doing really well in AA, and they'll have Midland Trail on Friday. And Trail is right there on the cusp of they lose again. That's probably it for them. I think that would bring their total to 5 losses on the year. I believe they're 2-4 right now. But it's extremely tough, and again, they've played a tough schedule. But yeah, here you are, you welcome in James Monroe, and that is a really difficult situation to be in. And obviously, Midland Trail was on a bye this past week, but I think the one thing I do like that favors them a little bit is they've seemed to have found something. The game against Nicholas County was pretty competitive not this past week, but the week before. And, Thad Brown's now going on 2 straight games where he didn't turn the ball over at quarterback, so it seems like he's kind of figured something out. He's getting it to his playmakers a little bit more, and he's avoiding those turnovers, avoiding putting his defense in some catastrophic spots. And that's going to be difficult to do against James Monroe, which is, been on a turnover binge here, whether it comes from strip sacks and fumbles or interceptions. And Bryce Gardner, we've talked about it, with Caden Hines. They've got some young kids that are kind of starting to put it all together. And, for Midland Trail, this is kind of it. If you don't do it, it's now or never.
Exactly. And, James Monroe's defense at this point is going to be extremely hard to score on. So that's going to really put a big test on, Midland Trail's ability. They definitely can't turn the ball over and give James Monroe short fields, but, even at that, James Monroe's offense is really kind of clicking right now. They're looking pretty solid in the way they're playing. They can throw it a little bit. They can definitely run it. So, I liked a lot of the misdirection that they did against West, which, they appear to be, running a sweep one way and the handoff come back the other direction, and that kind of hurt West a couple times. So, they've got several different options coming through, the line there. But I don't know. James Monroe's defense is just really, really impressive. And once they finally put it together a little bit, Shady didn't score a bunch of points on them, and Shady's offense is pretty prolific. It's pretty solid. So, all the other offenses have struggled down the stretch against them, and I think it's going to be a tall task for Midland Trail. I really do.
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me is, again, I covered the Midland Trail Summers County game. I didn't think that game was as lopsided as the score maintained. It was 46-20, but I thought Summers did a really good job of running the ball and pushing it down and just maintaining drives. And James Monroe is going to do that a lot more effectively than what Summers County did. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for this one.
They got several good options running the ball. And Brock Parker's, he's just like an absolute bowling ball going through there and really hard to stop. And, of course, Dowdy's really good too. And there's a little kid they've got a little change of pace back who
Comer.
Comer. when it got towards the end of the game there, and when Greenbrier West was trying to figure out how to stop these other guys, they'd hit Comer and he'd hit you for 10 or 15 yards, 20 yards, and it's just that frustrating back, that you can't tackle.
He's fast, like he's it's really weird to watch some of those other kids that are big maulers, more fullback types, and his hands like
he's just brutal to try to tackle, and you kind of could see it kind of kicked the wind out of Greenbrier West sails a little bit. So they've got several good options there, and I thought they were really pretty impressive in the pass game. They didn't throw a whole bunch, but they were solid. Ryan Mann was solid. Actually, Hines was really solid. He made a couple. He made that one big catch. And I'm pretty sure it was on 4th down. I'd have to look at my notes, but got him down inside the 10, I believe, on a key drive. So he's very athletic, great baseball player. So they all those things they seem to be clicking right now for James Monroe, and it's time of year you need them to be clicking.
Yeah. So I did mess up. Independence is not on the bye this week. They get Mingo Central, wrong. And
that's right.
Yeah, they got Mingo Central coming to town.
Is it homecoming?
I would imagine if it's not that one, that's probably the good spot for him coming. I would imagine, considering how senior nights and homecomings and all these things are scheduled, you're probably not doing it against AAA state runner-up.
Right.
But yeah, you get Mingo Central coming in, and Mingo Central's 2-4 at this point. For Independence, I don't expect anything too much different. They've been pretty dominant against AA competition.
Yep.
They've seen pretty much everything you could throw at them. They've seen traditional drop-back passing games. They've seen quarterback run games. They've seen run-heavy teams. They've seen it all. I don't think Mingo Central is going to present them anything that they haven't seen or that they're going to be unprepared for. I think the thing is just trying to get out of this game healthy for the Princeton game next week. That's really all it is for me.
Yeah, it's just one of those games you don't want to get caught looking ahead, because they probably going in, people are saying, Mingo Central's lost to this team, lost to that team. You've beat those teams. You should handle them without any trouble. You got the big game with Princeton, and people will chatter about that. Those kind of things that drive coaches crazy, and that's the thing is they just, you hear coaches talk about the key is to stay focused on the game at hand, stay focused on the game at hand. And as long as they do that, they will be fine. But, they're high school kids, so, you just never know.
Absolutely. Moving on to Nicholas County at Greenbrier East. And this one was originally scheduled when the two teams were AAA, and then Nicholas County bumped down before the season started. If you're Nicholas County, it's a chance to kind of get in and steal some extra AAA points. But, again, I just look at Greenbrier East each week, and I feel like just because of the personnel they have on offense, they're a tough out. For Nicholas County, I don't think that we've seen them win any games that they weren't supposed to win yet. They've taken care of the games they're supposed to, and they've lost the games that you can say, okay, like you're supposed to. You don't go in thinking that they're probably better than Oak Hill and AAA or Independence or
right.
So. So this is an opportunity, I think, if you're Nicholas County, to go in and finally get one of those ones to go the other way. I think Greenbrier is probably a little bit better, but if you get this one, it's like, okay, you cash in on some AAA points and set yourself up for a possible place in the playoffs, because again, Nicholas County has shaky down the road too.
Yeah, I think that Nicholas County's got some kids banged up too. They've lost some kids, so that's going to be a factor for one thing. But honestly, I can't recall the last time Nicholas County and Nicholas County and Greenbrier East played each other. That'd be an interesting thing stat to look up. But
I would imagine it's prior to 2009.
Yeah, but I just don't know. Greenbrier East is lethal, on offense, and if you can't get pressure on the quarterback, they really can give you fits. And, we've always, of course, didn't see the Oak Hill game, but I've seen Oak Hill enough to feel like they probably got pressure on the quarterback, and that's what kind of kept them in check a little bit. So I don't know if Nicholas County can do that, and that will be the key. Otherwise, I think, they're going to have a hard time matching the offensive output that Greenbrier East can put up on you. So it's definitely a big opportunity, and when you talk about playoffs, it's huge for them because it'd be a AAA win, a lot of points there. So I just don't know if they have enough defensively to slow Greenbrier East down.
Yeah, and one thing too to really look at this one, you hit on it with defenses, but Nicholas County, whenever I saw them play Independence, they tried to sell out to stop one thing, whether it be cover zero to force Brock into doing something and take away the run game or not. I don't think that they'll be able to do much of this because, again, we talked about Green Bay. So they got two very capable targets in the passing game, and of course you have May too. So yeah, it's hard to really.
And if they have any chance of playoffs, they've got to win this game. So they can't lose any more games down the stretch.
Absolutely. Two more: Riverview at Montcalm and Summers County at Westside. The Riverview at Montcalm one is interesting. We were looking at Montcalm's schedule. These next two games that they have, after this week they have Meadow Ridge.
Yep.
These are essentially like major play. If they're going to make the playoffs, they have to win these games, I think, because they have two losses already. One to Buffalo, one to Roanoke Catholic. And we've seen it the last 2 years. 8-2 has left them on the outside looking in. Yep. Obviously, you have the fourth class. You bump some of those teams out. You don't have James Monroe or some of those teams in single A anymore.
Right.
But now you're looking at Riverview. Riverview went in there and beat them. I think it was 24-6 or 24-0 last year, and then again Meadow Ridge. So for Montcalm, this is a very high stakes game, and the Riverview is coming off licking their wounds. They've been whooped the last 2 weeks. They've scored 6 points in each of their losses. I think the first one was to Sherman, and then last week at Tug Valley. Really a big points matchup game as far as the playoffs go. So this is a really intriguing competitive game with a lot on the line. I'd say probably, outside of, and it's right there with Beckley and Princeton, this might be the game that the stakes on this one are higher than any other ones.
Definitely, and I was a little, anytime you go to Naugatuck, to lose down there is not a shocker, but I was a little surprised that Riverview's kind of taking it on the chin like they have the last 2 weeks. That's a pretty good football team, and they've kind of been handled in both games. So, and to good teams. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, Sherman. I talked to you about it before. I'd seen them in the summer, and they definitely had some athletes and some big linemen, and as long as they stayed healthy, I thought they would be pretty good. So. And Tug Valley was supposed to be good, and of course they played Westside really good too. So, not Westside, but Mingo Central. I don't know. I don't know quite what to expect with Riverview right now. I mean, I don't know if they're having injury situations or what's going on, but they definitely need this game now. I mean, it's very important for them as much as it is for Montcalm. But if Montcalm can pull this off, if they can pull off the double the next 2 weeks, it might actually be historic, because that's probably going to put them in the playoffs for the first time ever in school history.
Yeah, you had hit on it, and I again haven't seen Riverview enough to discuss the quality of defenses they're playing, but I was kind of putting all the stats together. The only ones I'm missing right now are Oak Hill, and their quarterback is the first one in double-digit interceptions. He has 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and a chunk of those have come over the last 2 weeks.
Right.
So I'm assuming that teams are probably kind of capitalizing off the turnovers, and it might be one of those situations like the Liberty and Westside game where you get them back-to-back, and then next thing before you know, there's your quick 14 points.
Right.
Maybe that's what's happening, but I do think turnovers are probably playing a role in what's happened the last 2 weeks with them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of expectations at Riverview this year about making playoffs and having a kind of their historic season, since it's been a while since they've been to playoffs. But, I don't know. I didn't expect, what I've seen from them the last 2 weeks. Losses were not, out of the equation, but, those were pretty lopsided losses for them.
Yeah. Again, last game of this week that we want to hit on, Summers County at Westside. Summers County's been on the bye, but we've talked about it. Summers County is really interesting in the fact that they'll line up and hit you, and they've already beaten Pikeview, a team that gave Westside some trouble.
Yep.
Now again, they are extremely one-dimensional, so you can kind of load up the box and go at it that way. And Westside has tried that, and they did it against Liberty, and Liberty was able to get into the pass game a little bit more. I don't think Summers has that same capability to get into the pass game the same way Liberty did, but I'm kind of curious to see how they're able to rebound, because we've talked about it. The schedule isn't as much of an issue if you're winning those games. We talked about 2021 and 2022 Independence. Their schedule wasn't very good.
Right.
Most of the teams that they played were very bad. I don't think they had but maybe one team that finished over 500 each year, one or two. But the fact was that they were blowing teams out. Those games were done by halftime.
Right.
Meanwhile, we look at some of the games that Westside's played against Liberty and against Pikeview, and those games have been competitive into the second half.
Yep.
sometimes the other guys just have a good game. It is high school. You're talking about a bunch of 14 to 18-year-old kids, but Summers, this is really a test. Can you put your foot on the gas against Summers County and distance this thing early?
And it's really, as you watch football over the years, whether it be college or, any level, it's a tough situation. They're coming off of a game where, they had hoped to play much better and, maybe even win the game. Didn't go their way. They're coming into a game against now a single A opponent who they probably feel like they should win. How motivated are you going to be to play well? Are you going to be mentally into the game? Are you going to create, costly turnovers at bad spots and things like that? And a team like Summers, if they do get some confidence and kind of maybe get the lead or something, it's definitely going to cause some trouble for Westside. And that could be kind of a factor. Is Westside going to be mentally into this game? And with it coming as far as coming off the bye, what changes has Summers County made? Because they know their capabilities and their limitations. So, what kind of changes have they made to maybe, strike Westside quick, early in the game and kind of put them on the defensive, and then make it more of a, open things up a little bit where they can run it. Because I'm telling you, Tyson Atkins can really haul it, and if he hits you, he's going to hit you hard. So, it's a danger game for Westside. It's a game they should win, but it's a very dangerous game for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I want to see, if you're Westside, if you want to put Independence behind you, I want to see a distance in this game. I want to see a distance. I want to see you do it in the first half.
Well, they should handle this. They should handle, as good as they are, but we've seen weirder things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll wrap up Week 8. We'll go ahead and get into the Player of the Week. Player of the Week for our area via tiebreaker is Silas Nelson, and for the Kanawha Valley, it is Josh Moody, quarterback from Nitro. We talked about it this week. There were a lot of good candidates in our area, really even all across the board. For Silas, that's who I went with my vote. You went with Jalen Younger. I like Nelson stepping up. I thought he made really big key plays at key moments. I talked about the 54-yard catch and run on third down. And then he had a good kickoff return. I think he got about 30 yards. So all-purpose yardage well over 200, and then you added in 4 touchdowns. Just did it all, and I thought really well. And we know teams are coming in game planning to stop him. But like I said, there are a lot of good games. James Green had a really good game for Oak Hill. Jalen Younger had a really good game for Montcalm. I think that he's probably the area leader in passing yards right now. So, yeah, a really good competitive week.
Patriot Nation speaks again,
Yeah. See, again, this is the point that the tiebreaker of the poll, it does matter. He had over 8,000 votes. He is clearly the tiebreaker there.
Yeah, I got to talk, to Jalen before the season, and he's an interesting little dude, and he is a quarterback that wants to be a running back, so, he tried to talk his coach into letting him play running back this year, so, he's a very good quarterback and a really good kid, and, all those kids from Montcalm are really, really good kids, and, they don't have huge numbers, but, they all really get after it, so, he's an excellent player, but, Silas is he's special. Silas really is special.
Absolutely. And obviously we can't get off here without talking about the Golf State Championships. Went up there expecting that Shady would win, and that's exactly what they did. They had a couple kids that finished second and third as far as the medalist goes. You got a chance to go up there and cover it and see the course and how brutal it is. Medalist honors in AA were won by is it Luke Tew?
I think that's the way you say it, Jeff.
From Wheeling Central.
His home course.
Yeah, home course. We had some good kids in single A and triple A that had a shot. Rocky Fry from Montcalm. I think the back nine kind of got him a little bit, and then Hutchison from Greenbrier East. But overall, still just a really good showing from the area. And I think this is the first team title that we've had an area team win since 2020.
Right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Todd Duncan's senior year.
Yeah, but they, really since over the last 10 years, we've had, I think it's 6 individual champions and 6 team champions over the last 10 years in AA, out of Region 3. So, Region 3 is brutal to try to get to Wheeling, much less trying to win once you get up there. But, the course was just playing really, really, really tough. I mean, the greens were fast already. Kind of turned into a U.S. Open type condition. it was very windy, kind of brisk, and so the sun was baking on the greens. The greens almost became like this floor right there. It was like putting on concrete at a point, just so slick. So it became almost a battle of survival. And Shady went in with a 13-stroke lead as a team, which anybody knows anything about team golf, that can disappear in a heartbeat. So when they made the turn, they had to start on the back nine, which was the hardest part. They were 7 strokes up, but then played really well, especially over the first few holes. Tyler Beard really, kind of got things going really good for Shady, and they wound up winning by 17. But, that was a pretty impressive performance. I mean, I know probably when the Shady kids looked at the numbers, although they were ecstatic, winning the title. That's not what I'm saying, but they're going to look at the numbers and say, "Wow, we didn't play very, very good by their standards." But I think that's just youth, because I don't think they quite understand just how good those scores were under those conditions. And so, congratulations to them. And that's Tyler Beard, Cooper Ward, Jack Williams, and Grant Winkler. And the good news for the rest of the state is only Jack's only one graduates. So,
the kid that just picked up golf a year ago. So
yeah, Jack's pretty amazing. He's a great athlete anyway. And a great basketball player. But I did talk to him afterwards and told him, I said, I guess you have the bragging rights in the family now with 2 state titles.
Yeah, he's got 2 of them now. Yeah, Meg was the Player of the Year winner in volleyball, 1 ring. Yeah.
So and he just laughed about it, but he was. He talked also about the big deal about how his siblings were just really big in his life. And about Tommy, his older brother, really spurning him for basketball and got him playing golf. Tommy was the one that played golf, and he kind of joked that Meg got the competitiveness from her, because she's really quiet, but she, like Tommy, they got a burn inside them. But they're going to put you out. So just congratulations to Shady. That's the second in the last 5 years for them. They'll be pushing for a repeat next year, and we won't know till about December where the tournament's going to be next year. There's a lot of buzz about getting it out of Wheeling, because not many people like to go up there for one reason, and the course is brutal for high school kids. It's just really, until you walk the track or ride around as I do, because I'm not walking, it's just rugged, man. I mean, back when I really played a lot, I would love to have played it during that stretch, but there's no level lies, a lot of side hill lies, and danger all over the place, and so it's just a brutal track for basically about 90% of the field, and to try to walk that, I can't imagine. Even when I was younger, I can't imagine it. It's like walking up and down mountains all the time, so it's really tough. But maybe we can get it down here to Glade, and that would make things a little better for the local kids.
One thing that kind of stands out too when you say that is it also extends the tournament itself, like as far as the rounds go. Like you're talking kids shooting
they were
9, 10,
7-hour
11
rounds.
shots. Yeah.
And that's hard, when you're walking, and that was the thing, even with the brutal conditions, there were times where there was 3 groups on a tee, waiting to hit. So, not only were the conditions brutal, but if you're struggling a little bit and you're trying to find some rhythm, well, there's no rhythm to be found when you're standing there for 30 minutes before you hit a shot. So, just kudos to those kids. I mean, they don't, I think later in life, as they play more golf, they'll understand just how good they had to play to survive all that. And it was impressive. It really was.
Absolutely. You have any final thoughts before we wrap things up? I know obviously we got sectionals for the last of our fall sports coming up here in the next 2 weeks or so with volleyball and soccer, but really just outside of that, kind of the calm before the storm.
Yep, a big volleyball win this weekend for Woodrow up at the Top Dog tournament at Herbert Hoover. A lot of good teams up there. James Monroe finishes second, which everybody always wants to win, but they lose out to 4A Woodrow, but they beat AAA Herbert Hoover, who's number 2 this week now. They beat Cabell Midland, who I believe is 6 in Quad A. So a lot of good wins for James Monroe up there, and Woodrow just doing their thing, kind of quietly moving along, but looking pretty solid.
Yeah, it's again, we go back to this thing with James Monroe every week. It's tough because you're feeling good about that, but then you still have Phillip Barber and Oak Glen still in AA, which makes it extremely difficult.
Yeah, I'll tell you how hard AA is Williamstown 6th in the poll right now. So it's that top 6. That top 6 is just rugged in AA.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for my co-host Rusty Yurdy, I'm Tyler Jackson. That'll wrap things up. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. We'll see you next week.